our interviewer, who is my good friend Steve Fischer. One sec. Sorry. Okay. Hi, Steve.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for waiting patiently for
no
your
problem.
panel.
Oh, sure.
And we're also going to bring in our guest, Armin Shimerman, who is just beloved in geek circles. Welcome, Armin.
Welcome.
Thank you. That's quite an introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you well.
Yes, we can. Good. I'm going to pop out and let you two chat. I just wanted to introduce you. I also want to say that I was introduced to you on Buffy. And even though you played the villain, I still love you. You played a fantastic villain, like just absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure to be on Buffy, and I missed those people.
Yeah, I can imagine. So thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to your interview. I'll be in the background pulling the strings with the comments. So, all right, go to it.
Bye-bye, Kelly.
Bye.
Well, hello there, Armin. For all the people that are out there, this is Armin Shimerman. You may know him most from maybe Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He was Quark. You may know Dr. Nefarious from Ratchet and Clank. Kelly was just alluding to Principal Snyder from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He's been in lots of television shows. He does Shakespeare. He teaches Shakespeare. And some other characters that you might not know. There are characters named Morgan de Winter, Kelly Edwards, Dr. John Dee. These are characters that Armin has created as an author. And a lot of people know, oh, he's Quark, he's on TV, but he is an author, and he's written a whole series of books. And I think your first book, was that the 34th Rule?
No, my first book was Merchant Prince.
Oh, okay.
And the 34th Rule was a collaboration with David. We tried to sell it as a episode to Deep Space Nine. They didn't buy it, so David suggested we write it as a novel, and that's the 34th Rule.
Okay, very nice. And then I know the Merchant Prince series. You have the Merchant Prince, Outrageous Fortune, and Capital Offense, and they came out in the early 2000s. That science fiction, I've read it. I love it. And why don't you tell us who the main character is? Dr. John Dee. Why don't you tell people who John Dee was in?
Right. Well, the Merchant Prince series it is science fiction, and it deals with an Elizabethan character, as Steve said, Dr. John Dee. John Dee was a real person who had the largest library in England at the time. He was a scientist. He was an engineer. He was a mystic. Elizabeth asked him. He was also an astrologer and astronomer. As an astrologer, she asked him for the most propitious day for her to start her reign, Elizabeth I, and he proposed, I believe it was November the 17th. I believe that's the day, and she got crowned on that day, and attributed her long run to many things, but one of them was that she had been crowned on December the 17th. John Dee was a courtier in the Elizabethan court. He taught a lot of people about science. He tried to help to find, I believe it's latitude. Was he latitude or longitude? I don't remember. He was just this great Renaissance man who, unfortunately, has gone down in history as somewhat of a kook, because he spent most of his life trying to communicate with angels. And unfortunately for him, he had several people who went into trances. They were called screers, and they told John Dee that they were communicating with heaven, and he set about asking heaven questions. And in the course of the years that he worked with these screers, he formed a dictionary called the Enochian Dictionary, which was the Dictionary of Angelic Language. And because of those endeavors, history has not looked kindly on him. But in the recent 75 years, people have found him and are very awed by the scientific and engineering things that he was able to accomplish. It is also possible, and that's what my present books are about. It's also possible that John Dee interacted with William Shakespeare and may have been responsible for some of Shakespeare's successes. Certainly, John Dee is considered to be the role model for Prospero in The Tempest. Many people consider Dee to be the person that Shakespeare was thinking about when he wrote The Tempest.
Very nice. And so I know for those people that might not know the Merchant Prince series, it is a science fiction series, and not, no giving spoilers away. But I will say that John Dee is transported from his Elizabethan time to the year 2099 and has to try and figure out this whole new world.
How to get back. Yeah.
And this whole new world. And I loved the dynamic of him seeing things and being told things, but still thinking supernatural. Like, he's got computer monitors that he can see what's going on, and he thinks there must be a demon inside somehow showing him things, because he can't understand technology. And I really thought that was really fun. And I liked that he, throughout all three books, continued to speak in the Elizabethan tongue, and people always would, you have a funny way about your speech. Why? And that's how he spoke.
Right. One of the things you mentioned earlier, that I was a Shakespeare teacher, and I am. I do quite a bit of that. In fact, I just came from one just moments ago. And one of the things I instill upon the people who come to my lectures is that one of the difficulties with understanding Shakespeare is not thinking like an Elizabethan. Is the world has changed in 400 years, and there are a lot of things that we consider to be everyday situations that they would think of as supernatural. So my attempt in The Merchant Prince was to keep that Elizabethan way of thinking and speaking while he's involved with all this modern technology in a modern world. Not so modern. It's in the future world.
Yes. It was great. And I know that you have three new books, or three current books with Dr. Dee, taking place back in the Elizabethan times, the Illyria series, Betrayal of Angels, Sea of Troubles, and Imbalance of Power.
That's right.
I backed those on Kickstarter, so I am looking forward to getting them, because I have not yet read them, but I am very much looking forward when they come in to read them. What is it? Because I know you've done a lot of TV and theater and whatnot, but what was it that made you want to start writing?
It's the other way around, actually. I wanted to write long before I wanted to be an actor.
Okay.
And if I may put it this way, I was seduced by the dark side of the Force, and was convinced that I was a workable actor. So, but I always wanted to write, and I got the opportunity to do it. I was sitting at a Star Trek convention, and next to me was a man from a publishing company, an editor and a publisher. And he asked me if I would be interested in writing, and those early ambitions rose to the fore. And I said yes. And he put me in contact with a very good writer named Michael Scott from Ireland, who has written a lot of fantasy novels and is a wonderful writer. And Michael and I sat down and worked out the plot for Merchant Prince, the first Merchant Prince novel. And I've been writing ever since. The first book was with Michael Scott. the second one was with Chelsea Yarborough, and the third and the third book that you mentioned, I wrote by myself. But with Michael, because I was a beginning writer, he wrote about 40%. Excuse me, he wrote about 60% of it. I wrote about 40% of it. With Chelsea Yarborough, I wrote about 60% of it. She wrote about 40% of it. And as I said, for the third book, it was completely me. And in the new set of books, what I call the Illyria series, that's all me. And again, I'm dealing with an Elizabethan character. However, it is not science fiction. It is a political period piece, a mystery piece. And again, I try to emulate the speaking style of the people of that time, trying to make it not so difficult, but
Sure.
certainly to give a flavor of that, and to get people to, in a sense, take a time machine back 400 years into Europe and England of 1583.
Well, we have a question from Kristen Mary. She wants to know, what is your favorite Shakespeare play? I know you don't like to play favorites. When in interviews you say, well, don't give me a favorite, but I mean, what do you like?
It's true, I don't like to have favorites. So usually my answer, if I'm pressed to the wall, is whatever play I'm doing at the time. So if I'm doing Hamlet at the time, then Hamlet is my favorite. If I'm doing Timon of Athens is my favorite. If I'm directing Twelfth Night, then Twelfth Night. If I'm writing about Twelfth Night, which is what the Illyria series is about, then Twelfth Night is my favorite. So since I'm talking to you about the Illyria series, I suppose the answer is Twelfth Night is my favorite at this moment.
Okay, that's good. Molly Daniels says she needs book 2. Do you have any plans to come back to Indianapolis for a Comic-Con in May?
Actually, I was in Indianapolis just last year doing a book festival for my second book, A Sea of Troubles. So I was just there. I don't believe I'm coming back to Indianapolis this year, but I will mention, since obviously Molly comes from Indianapolis, that I proposed to my wife in Indianapolis, and I have very fond memories of Indianapolis. I was working at Indiana Rep, which is right there in downtown Indianapolis.
Oh, very nice. So now that you are an author, what is your process like when you decide you're going to write a book? How do you attack it?
Well, what usually happens is I have an idea, and I know how it starts and I know how it ends, and the process is how to figure out to go from the beginning to the end. I don't outline things. I don't give myself suggestions about what each chapter is going to be about. I just start to write, and it takes me in all sorts of directions, and then eventually I have enough words to publish.
That's wonderful. And so what is it, I guess, in Shakespeare? What is your big draw to the whole Elizabethan era in all Shakespeare? And
okay, that's an excellent question. Excellent question. Why am I drawn to Shakespeare? It started in high school when I got to do Claudius and Hamlet, very young Claudius, and I was gobsmacked by the language and what was being said, and I'm still gobsmacked. I'm still in awe of how Shakespeare writes and some of the incredible insights he has into humanity. I suppose that's why certain TV shows are more dear to me than others, because they deal with the insights into humanity. But writing is my way of putting ideas together in a well-formed way. The putting together of a perfect sentence is my idea of heaven, and I aspire to that. And if I keep at it long enough, I hope to create some lines that are of the same merit as Shakespeare or any of the great writers.
good. I like
it's
that.
A bar too high. I never aspire to reach the bar, but it it is great fun trying to reach that bar.
Sure.
If I can attain it, lovely, terrific. But it's just the process of trying to get there that intrigues me. And Shakespeare, because I perform so much in Shakespeare, because I've taught Shakespeare, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't have something to do with Shakespeare. As I said earlier today, I was teaching a class which I just got off of, and he just intrigues me. And it's not just Shakespeare; it's the
Hmm.
entire period. It's a fascinating period of human history, and I eagerly eat up anything new that I can find.
Great. So you did stage, and what got you into working and becoming an actor?
Um, uh, I was again in high school. This was before Hamlet. I did a play before Hamlet, and there was a moment on stage where I lost myself, where I knew I was playing a character, and there was about 10 or 15 minutes when I came off stage and I couldn't remember um, being on stage. It wasn't amnesia or anything like that. I was so involved in the needs and intentions of that character. His name was John Proctor. Um, that it was like a drug. I was like, how do I do that? How do I lose myself in something else? And that became somewhat of an addiction that I wanted to recreate that phenomena. It doesn't always happen, it rarely happens. But again, striving for that is what kept me going as an actor. And then I must say, I was enormously, enormously lucky. As a young man, and even as an older man, I was constantly being given work, either that I auditioned for or because people were aware of my past work. And so it was just being offered to me. And my profession is a very difficult one, difficult for people to achieve any success in, to make a living in.
Hmm.
And I just lucked out. When I look back, I don't know how I got here. I only know that the gods and fortune was smiling, and they led me here.
That's nice.
I mean,
Here.
I mean, there are so many events that if I had turned left instead of right, or if I turned right instead of left, uh, major things would not have happened. For instance, I'm looking at the Deep Space Nine poster behind you, um, and 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 thinking of Star Trek. And most people think of me with Star Trek. That would not have happened. It should not have happened. Uh, I was working on a show called Beauty and the Beast, and in the panel right before me, they mentioned Ron Perlman. I was doing a show with Ron Perlman called Beauty and the Beast, and I had auditioned for a Star Trek episode, and got it. And then there was a conflict. Beauty and the Beast, which was my bread and butter, needed me on the same day that Star Trek needed me. But I was a Star Trek fan, and my agent insisted that I do Beauty and the Beast because that was my bread and butter. But I was a Star Trek fan and said, no, I want to do the Star Trek. And we had a huge argument. And because I'm the client, I won the argument, and I did the minor episode of Star Trek, which of course led to everything that's behind you. Um, and it shouldn't have happened. I should have taken he really was good advice. I should have taken my agent's advice and done the Beauty and the Beast. I continued on Beauty and the Beast, and later became a series regular on Star Trek. But there are a lot of things like that. That's just fortune. That's just luck. That's just it wasn't decided. I didn't decide. I didn't. It just happened that way, and I was in the right place at the right time, over and over and over again.
We have a question from Phoenix Sisters Cosplay. So, if you could invite any 5 of your characters from your books to a dinner party, which 5 would you invite?
Well, I would certainly start with John Dee, who I've spent a lifetime studying. So
Oh, certainly.
we'll start with John Dee. Because my present books and my whole life has been studying Shakespeare, I would like Shakespeare to come
Hmm.
as well. Um, I'm rather happy with my creation of Orsino in my book, so I'd like for him to come as well. His wife, Diane, I would like for her to come. And just for to keep the party lively, um, uh, I would like Sir Toby Belch to come as well.
Nice. What is Hollis Thompson asks, what is an Elizabethan play written by someone other than Shakespeare that you would be excited to perform in?
I would like to do Dr. Faustus, which is a Marlovian play. That would be great fun. There were a lot of great playwrights in Elizabethan times that are overshadowed by Shakespeare. There was Peele and Marlowe and Greene uh, uh, and dozens of others. But I think Faustus would be the play that I would like to do. I may be a little old now for Faustus, but I could play the devil, so that would be okay.
We have a question from Katie Malarkey. She says, one of my favorite roles of yours was as Pascal in Beauty and the Beast. Do you have any stories to share from your time on that wonderful show?
Well, besides the one I just told you now, I do have a charming one that I remember fondly. I had done a number of episodes on Beauty and the Beast, and thank you, Katie, for your kind words about Pascal. That was my apprenticeship, by the way. I learned to work on TV by doing Beauty and the Beast. But I remember the first season that I was on was over, and there was a wrap party, and I was talking to a number of the actors, and this guy came over and put his arm around me and started talking to me like I was his best friend, and I hadn't the faintest idea who it was. Um, um, and we chatted for about 5 minutes, and he walked away. And I turned to my wife and I said, "I don't know who that was. Who was that? Do you know who that was?" And she said, "That's Ron Perlman. That's your star." I had never seen Ron out of makeup, and so I didn't know what he looked like in real life. So that kind of wonderful. Also, the man who played father on that show was a man named Roy Dotrice, who was slightly responsible for the creation of Pascal. And working with Roy again, because I had worked with him in Henry V in Stratford, that was quite lovely. But it was a great show. And for those of you who are not familiar with Beauty and the Beast, and perhaps even Katie doesn't know this, but the man who was the showrunner, the man who was the man who came up with the stories and wrote a number of the stories, was a man named George R.R. Martin, who we all know now from Game of Thrones.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
So those are some of my stories from Beauty and the Beast.
So yesterday I went. Oh, sticky. Okay, we have another question from Kristen.
Memory James Avery. Yeah.
Yes, James Avery.
James and I were attached at the hip. His character and mine were constantly bickering, and we had sort of a bromance on the show. And I remember James fondly. He's passed away now. He always called me dad and called my wife mom. And James, of course, is a 6'2", I believe, black man. So we would stop traffic when he would yell out "mom" and "dad." But I loved working with James. He was phenomenal and very kind. He had done a lot more TV than I had. And as I said, working on Beauty and the Beast was my transition from the theater to TV, and I learned to do less on Beauty and the Beast, and a lot of it was from watching Perlman, but a lot of it also was working with James, and our bickering and our love fest is still very dear to me, and I miss him a lot.
Regarding Star Trek, yesterday I went and rewatched the very first Ferengi episode on The Next Generation, and it was very interesting to see the progression of the Ferengi from the very first to the very end. And one of my thoughts was, when you first showed up as a Ferengi in Star Trek, how long did it take to get the makeup on versus your very last scene on Deep Space Nine as Quark? Had they perfected it so that it was a lot less time, or?
Although they're both Ferengi makeups, they're both radically different makeups. So the Ferengi makeup for that episode, which was called The Last Outpost, had 7 pieces. And Quark's makeup had 2 pieces. So that made a
Wow.
big difference in the gluing. The original time, I think, for that Ferengi makeup, the character's name was Letek, took about 4 hours. When we sat down the first day of Deep Space Nine to put the makeup on, it took about 3 hours. About a month after that, of the 7 years that Karen and I worked together, Karen was my makeup artist, Karen Westerfield. She got it down to 2 hours, and it never got below 2 hours. It was pretty much
Okay.
always 2 hours. So there's that. I do want to say up front that I hate my performance in that episode that you watched, and my whole agenda as Quark, well, not the whole agenda, but I would say a great deal of my agenda, was to eradicate that performance in that episode, Last Outpost, that you saw. What I did was god awful, horrible, silly, and unprofessional. And I didn't mean it to be those things, but in hindsight, I am quite aware of it. And Quark was my attempt to take a one-dimensional character that I had created in that episode and transform him into a 3-dimensional character on Deep Space Nine.
And I really think that you did that. And Deep Space Nine, I think, had a great ensemble cast that you were placed with. So I think, working together was great. And I enjoyed seeing Quark's story evolve. I enjoyed seeing the how you played off with the other characters and the other Ferengi. And I did hear something about how whenever there was a Ferengi heavy episode, you would bring all of the Ferengi cast over to your place to. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. One of the things that was very obvious to me and all the other characters who recurred as Ferengi was that once we put the head on, we went deaf. Those big ears were like, big earplugs, and it was very difficult to hear, which makes it difficult to act if you can't hear what the other actor is saying. You certainly can see what the faces are doing, but you can't necessarily always hear them. So early on, and it wasn't just for the Ferengi, Renee, who played Odo, and I would get together often in the beginning as well. So what I did was I invited all the characters, the actors, to come to my house for the weekend, and we would rehearse the scenes. Now, this never happens in television. First of all, professional actors don't do things for free. They want to get paid for it, and I wasn't paying them anything except giving them food for lunch. But they knew that they needed to have this extra rehearsal in order to give the very best performances that we could all possibly give. And we did that for 7 years. We would indeed on Ferengi heavy episodes get together, work out what we were going to do, discuss how the director might want to approach it, work the lines. Because one of the other things about wearing the head was because we were encased in all that rubber, our heads got warm, and I could only equate it to what people feel like when they have a head cold and your head gets sort of head and you get a little dreamy and
Sure.
things begin to wash in front of you. And we knew that after about the 8th hour, usually our days were about 12 hours. So usually about the 8th hour, we were working on fumes. And so we needed this rehearsal to allow us to put some sort of muscle memory and mental memory into our performances in the scenes that were coming in after the 8th hour. That was essential, or we would have given less than perfect performances. I did not want to fall into the same trap that I had fallen into in Last Outpost. And they kindly, more than kindly, heroically, came to my house and did it month after month after month. And I'm very grateful to their professionalism.
It seems like it would be very helpful, especially with not being able to hear.
Yeah, it was very helpful, and if we succeeded beyond the pale, it's because we took the time and wanted to put in extra time to make it as good as possible. Understand, um, the Ferengi are not the Vulcans. Um, there's an instinctive respect for Vulcans and like species. Ferengi are at the bottom of the hierarchical ladder, and in order to gain some modicum of understanding, of respect, of interest, we knew we had to work harder because of the roles that we were given. Um, it I mean, a lot of people hated the Ferengi on Next Generation, and rightfully so. And we knew we had to work hard to be considered a peer to the other species.
You mentioned Odo, and I will say I liked the dynamic that when the series started out, you and Odo were very much at odds, and you were always the lowest of the low, and he was, you know, Mr. I'm in charge. And by the end of the series, well, you didn't hug, but you seem to have a much more mutual understanding. And can you tell me, like, maybe what was it like working with uh, Rene Auberjonois?
Very good. Excellent pronunciation of his last name.
Thank you.
A lot of people get it wrong. Um, what was it like working with Rene Auberjonois? Divine. He's a he's a crown prince in the American theater. He's done performances that are still talked about, legendary. Um, I was always it was always an honor for me to work with Rene. That said, I did a play with Rene before we did Deep Space Nine,
Mm.
and I didn't much care for him in that play. I did as a person, not as a character. He did a great job
Oh,
on
okay.
stage. I just didn't like him as a person, mainly because we had nothing to say to each other. We there was no reason for us to talk because we
Mm.
had no scenes together and all kinds of things. So I felt he was a less than congenial person at the time. And when I got the script and knew that Renee was going to play Odo, I thought, oh, this is easy. Quark doesn't like Odo, and my God, that shouldn't be hard to play. Um, then again, luck, fortune. Um, the makeup department decided to sit Renee right next to me in the makeup trailer,
Oh.
and and because we had to sit there for long hours while we were being made up, our friendship grew, blossomed, grew some more, uh, turned into a loving relationship, not a sexual loving one, but a great friendship,
Mm-hmm.
and and we became extraordinarily good friends. And the writers, being no fools, saw that relationship on in dailies. They didn't necessarily choose a particularly loving instance for the final cut, but they saw several times where perhaps we were a little more kindly to each other than the script indicated.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just began to draw upon that and to write the bromance that became our relationship. And they always kept it antithetical, but they always allowed us to bring our friendship somewhat uh, onto screen. And it, it's it's something that a lot of Star Trek fans, especially of our show, talk about. And I know both of us, Renee has now passed on as well,
Mm-hmm.
but I know both of us esteemed a great deal.
Dave Mattingly asks, who was Quark's best friend on DS9?
Rom,
Rom is his brother, and yes,
and again, it's a love-hate relationship,
oh
but
yes, most certainly.
uh, Rom, uh, if Quark ever had a problem, he went to Rom. He didn't go to Odo. He might, but not often. He certainly didn't go to anybody else, but he would go to Rom. And he may not always get what he wanted from Rom as far as understanding, but yeah, I would say Rom was his best friend.
And I'd like to say that seeing you appear on Lower Decks was great fun. And I had seen someone had asked you about wearing the teeth for the show, because you said yes, you had to wear the teeth to get the voice. So right. Did you have a pair of teeth left over from way back, or did they have to remake a pair of teeth for you? Or
neither. One of the mysteries to me was, after 7 years of working as Quark, in the last 2 months before the show finished shooting, somebody stole the teeth from my trailer.
Oh.
And they had to make a new set of teeth. And I kept those teeth, those replacement teeth, which were very close to the originals. But one of the things that's about human anatomy is teeth move in your mouth. And for the years that my prosthetic teeth lived in their container, they lived there while my teeth began to move.
Okay.
And years later, when I needed them for something, they didn't fit. They didn't fit over my present teeth or the teeth at that time. And I realized I had a project coming up. It was a voiceover project where I needed to wear them, and I knew it wouldn't sound like Quark without the teeth, and I knew the teeth that I had just were inoperable. So I have a niece, Natasha, who was going to makeup school at the time, and I asked her to create another set of teeth for me for that project that was coming up in the future. And she did, but she was a student and not a professional, and they fit. That's the good point, but they didn't have the same makeup as the teeth that I had used on Deep Space Nine. So when I was asked to do Lower Decks, I knew, again, I had to have teeth. I didn't want to go through the process of making a new set of teeth, so I used Natasha's teeth. Now, they don't make me sound like Quark as much as I'd like them to. Not Natasha's fault. It's just the way things work out. So yes, I did wear Natasha's teeth for Lower Decks, but when I watch the episode, I go, it doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound right.
Regarding coworkers on Star Trek, one of the things that I have recently been doing is listening to a podcast from the Shuttlepod show, and Connor Trenier and Dominic Keating from Enterprise do this podcast. And one of the things they talk about is, having done lots of television, you always say when you're 16 hours with your current cast, when the show's over, you're going to stay friends. We're going to, I'm going to still talk to you. We'll get in touch. And it doesn't happen a lot. But they said with Star Trek, you stay close. There's a bond with the Star Trek family because you see them at cons. You see them all over the world on the Star Trek cruises. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
It's absolutely true. Conventions and cruises and interviews, because Star Trek is meaningful to a lot of people, we have lots of opportunities to get together, and we do get together, and it does keep us as friends. Some are more friendly than others. Some shows were very friendly. On my show, we have a lot of actors who live in different parts of the world, so the only time we see them is at conventions. And some of our actors don't really do conventions, so I don't see them as often. But a lot of the other casts do see each other, and most of those other casts from the other shows, they all live in Los Angeles, so they see each other in town, and they do get together. But yes, we are a family, and some of our family we get to see more than others, but we do stay a family because of those things that Dominic said. But the only difference, because it's in my mind, and I do want to say it,
Sure,
it is that all the people that I work with are very, very, very close friends of mine. But Renee was special. Renee, before Renee passed away, we did a lot of things. It wasn't conventions and it wasn't just
Hmm.
cruises.
Sure.
We actually vacationed together. We took trips together. We saw each other on a regular basis. We were at each other's house for dinner many, many times. That was an extra special relationship. As much as I love the other people on the show, Renee was my Armin's best friend on the show.
That's wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like working with Wallace Shawn, the Grand Negus?
Yeah, Wally was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I have a story to tell against myself about Wally. I loved Wally. He was always brilliant and fun to be around. And his line readings were exquisitely funny. Just it was hard for me not to laugh in the middle of a camera shoot because he was just so incredibly funny and wonderful. However, that said, and here's the story against myself. And I apologize to Wally if he's listening because I've never told him this. So all my life, I've been an actor in various forums, and I have heard of stories and experienced a couple where the leading actor, for some reason, takes a dislike to a supporting actor and has them fired, has them relegated to the back of the bus, or have their scenes cut to nothing, to shreds. And I've never understood that behavior. I always thought we're doing this together. We're an ensemble. Each part of the ensemble is important. Each part of the ensemble must be respected. So I never understood this egomaniacal desire to get rid of someone because, for whatever reason. Usually, it's because the supporting member is just too good. It's just too good, and
Hmm.
is in a sense upstaging, if we can call it that, of the leading actor who's supposed to be the shining light of a production. Okay, so Wally had been on the set several times, and I remember one day everything he did was hysterical. He had the crew and the cast in bent over backwards, bent over forwards in laughter. And not only is he funny, he's wise. He's enormously wise and knowledgeable and well read. And one is and is Wally. People may not be aware of. Wally is one of America's greatest playwrights. He has written
Huh.
some enormously important plays. Everything he did that day was perfect. And for about 5 minutes, that green-eyed demon, envy, in, inhabited my head and my rubber head as well, and I was enormously jealous of him. And something rose up in me and said, where does he get off having all this attention? I'm the leading actor. Where does he get off? And that lasted for about 5 to 7 minutes. And then after that, my good angel whispered in my ear, "What are you doing?" And I went, "Oh my God, this is how this happens. This is how that behavior that I never understood happens." And I stopped it immediately. uh, You know, so that's how good Wally is.
Huh. Um, one of the things that I've heard in the Shuttle Pod show is a lot of Star Trek actors come from Shakespeare backgrounds or have a lot of Shakespeare experience. And I understand that on some of the cruises, they'll have like a Shakespeare show where some of them will get up and read soliloquies. And what do you think it is about Shakespeare that draws these actors for Star Trek?
Well, it isn't that the actors are drawn, it's that they're chosen. And the reason why they're chosen is that they have an expertise with language. That's what classical theater gives an actor, is an expertise with language. So how to use difficult language and make it sound believable. That's what you have to do as a Shakespearean actor. That's what you have to do as a Star Trek actor. Uh, we don't speak in iambic pentameter in science fiction, but we do speak in what's called technobabble. We have a lot of
Yes.
words that don't make sense or aren't real, and we have to make them sound like they're real. Thankfully, my character rarely had to ever do that. But because of that facility with language that we get from classical theater, uh, that is gives us a little bit of a leg up when we're at the audition process. We make that strange world come to life, and that's the other part. It's not just the language. In Shakespeare, you're dealing with cosmic issues. We're not dealing with kitchen sink issues.
Mm.
And certainly that's what happens in Star Trek as well. You're dealing with cosmic issues. Some actors have no facility to act in those cosmic situations. They are brilliant kitchen sink actors. Every little nuanced thing is clearly um, seen in their eyes and in their face and in the way they say things. But they have a problem with huge cosmic issues, where Shakespeare makes us familiar easy with those issues, and that's what you have to have when you're approaching a Star Trek role.
One of the questions we had in here was from Molly Daniels. She wanted to know, was each episode filmed sequentially or in parts?
Always in parts. There is. I've never heard of a TV show ever shot sequentially. Perhaps once in a blue moon, a film might be done that way, but because of the economics of TV or film, for that matter, it must be shot sequentially. There's no reason to keep a set or an actor uh, um, available for an entire week if you're only going to use the actor in 2 scenes. Then it's best to shoot him out in 1 day. Shoot him, do the 2 scenes in 1 day, and shoot him out. Now he may appear or she may appear at the beginning and in the end. So shoot the beginning and the end and get him out. Same thing for a set. Get the set out of the way because we don't need it more than twice or 3 times, and then get rid of it and move it out. So almost invariably, things are shot in sequence. And what a TV actor or a film actor has to learn, as opposed to a theater actor who does work sequentially, is what is the arc? How do I change in this episode from the beginning to the end? What are the demarcations of what my journey is? And that you have to learn as you're as investigating the script when you first get it. How do I change? And then try to remember that, so that if you're shooting the middle of the scene on the very first day, what got you there and how far do you have to go?
Sure. I know when you were doing Deep Space Nine in Quark, you were also at the same time doing Principal Snyder on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And can you say what it was like to be Quark on one day and Principal on the next?
Long days, very long days. And again, luck. My contract said I could not do any other program but Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
My producers allowed me to do it, and not just Buffy. I did a dozen or more shows at the same time, and yet my contract said I was not allowed to do that. I suggested this to some of my friends on Voyager who attempted to do the same thing, to go on to other shows while they were doing Voyager. And they had a different showrunner than I had. And they were forbidden because the contract said they couldn't do it. Again, luck. But what was it like? Okay. It was a great advantage to do both shows. Despite the long hours, and there were long hours, there were at least 2 days where I worked around the clock, where I came to work for Star Trek at 5 and finished Buffy at 5 in the morning. Why was it an advantage? I don't know how to explain this to people who aren't actors, or even to actors who have never experienced this. It was like doing repertory theater. One day you're playing Hamlet, and on another day you're playing Malvolio. They're 2 different characters and 2 different sizes of roles. And what happens is you don't get bored with the role that you're doing because there's another role to play.
Hmm.
There's another role that takes your mind off of the role that you're initially committed to. And it allows you to regenerate and rejuvenate your juices so that you go back and 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 you want to have as much joy with the first role as you did when you first started doing it. I must tell you, after 7 years of Star Trek, all of us were a little tired of our characters. We were happy and very good at performing them, but we were a little tired of performing them.
Sure.
My being able to do Snyder on Buffy and the other roles that I was able to do rejuvenated me so that I was probably less tired
Hmm.
than anybody else at the set.
Kristen Marie asks, okay, so you were on an episode of Hooperman with
Yeah,
John Ritter.
that's right.
And I also know that you were in a TV movie that he was in called Tricks of the Trade.
Tricks of the Trade.
Did you work
I
much
worked with
John,
John
or?
on Hooperman. No, I worked with John on Hooperman, and I remember him to being a very gracious, giving person. Um, uh, Makes a difference what happens off camera as well as on camera. And one of the nice things, one of the things I learned from people like John is that you must be open, kind, convivial, a human being with your guest stars. And that's one of the things that John showed me. He was that way with me. Couldn't have been nicer. And I enjoyed the experience tremendously. Now, it's a long time ago, and I don't have any specifics, but I do remember he was a joy to work with. And I'm sorry that I didn't get to work with him more.
Dave Mattingly says, I've noticed that two-role benefit Quark and Principal by being involved in rocket science, preaching, and improv comedy and radio all at once. The energies build on each other.
That's right. That's right. The energies build on each other. That's a good way to put it. Thank you.
Yeah. So one question that I have is, you've done cons, you've done lots of Q&As. Has there ever been something that in the back of your mind you wished someone would ask that no one's ever asked about that you want people to know?
Sure. It's a good question. And since I'm interested in my books, I'm going to say I wished you had asked me more about not my Merchant Prince books, but my Illyria books. So I am going to take the advantage of that right now.
Okay.
I am a novelist, and I do more writing recently than I have done acting. So I'm flattered that people are interested in my acting career, and I'm glad to talk about it. But I am a novelist, and I'm very proud of the books that you have pictured there right next to your ear. And my books are wonderful time machines to go back in history. And if you're interested in history at all, if you're interested in in a fascinating era, which the Elizabethan era was, I hope that people will go either to my website www.arminshimerman.com and purchase the books there, or they can, and my website will direct you to www.jumpmasterpress.com, which is where my publisher is, and you can buy the books there. A lot of people have been kind enough to say that they're fascinating novels. They learned a lot about history. They learned a lot about characters. That they're about history, but they're also comic. They do have to deal with the comic characters of Twelfth Night, and I know a lot of people said that they learned a lot and they laughed a lot. So that's a question that I wish was asked more.
Okay. Well, I'm very interested in receiving these books. I can't wait because I really want to read them.
And if I may point out, thank you, Steve. If I may point out, two of them, the first two are already out. They've been out for a long time. It's Only in Balance of Power. The third book, what's today? Today's the 21st, which comes out in 3 days. And if you order it on the 24th, you should be able to get it on the 26th.
Now, do you go out and do book signings?
I have, yes, and that's what happened in Indianapolis last year. I go out and do book signings that my publisher arranges, and it's great fun because I mean, usually people come to me because they know of me as an actor, and then when they start reading some of the books, they come back to me and say, "I really like this. This is really good." we're all of us are capable of doing many things, and all we have to do is find out what those things are that we like to do, and do them. And writing is that for me. As I said, it was my original ambition,
Mm-hmm.
and I have much more to say now that I have white hair than I did when I was a young man.
That's good. So, do you think in future novels you'll stay with the Elizabethan?
If I write any more, and my publisher is begging me to do that, I think I will stay with the Elizabethan, Steve, because the adage is you should write what you know, and I have studied Shakespeare in Elizabethan times since I was 19.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm well past 19 now. It's what I know best. So yes.
All right, and sorry to stop this, but we are at time. Armin, you've been such a wonderful guest. I've really been enjoying this, and I'm going to have to check out your books because they sound amazing. Sorry, I'm getting ring light glare. So again, repeat your website for anyone who
Sure.
may miss it.
It's relatively simple. Just have to spell Shimerman right. It's www. Armin Shimerman, as it is written there on the screen, .com. Go to is it books or shop? You go to shop, which is there, and it will give you the option to buy 1 book, 2 books, 3 books. The triplet, the box set, as is pictured there next to Steve, is available, as it said, come the 24th. But you can buy them individually, or you can buy them as a box set, and I hope people will enjoy them. I know many people already have, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, they sound amazing. I love John Dee, so I'm so fascinated by him.
I am too. I've spent a life studying him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here, Steve. Thank you so much for hosting
thank
this.
You. Yes, and thank you, Armin.
My pleasure, Steve. Thank you for the lovely questions.
Oh, you're welcome.
And so I'm just going to play our video begging people to give their money to our worthwhile cause. And then I'm going to get into the next panel. So again, thank you, Armin. This was so wonderful. We all love you very much.
Oh, thank you. You're very kind. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome.
Good luck with the charity, because I know you do good things, and I, as I say again, John was a terrific human being.
He really, it sounds like he was both off screen and obviously he touched all of us on screen. So thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye. Our charity partner for this year's Multiverse FunRaiser is the John Ritter Foundation for Aortic Health. They exist to spread awareness of aortic health and prevent unnecessary suffering through genetic research, widespread education, and radical advocacy. Simply click on the link at our website, www.themultiversefundraiser.com, that says donate here, and that will take you to our Just Giving link. All donations go directly to the John Ritter Foundation for Aortic Health. As a bonus, every $10 donation that you give enters you into our sweepstakes to win fantastic prizes. All information can be found at our website under giveaway. So thank you for watching and thank you for supporting.